record. The session is being recorded for sharing with you all as well as colleagues that were not able to make the session today. One thing that I would like to bring your attention to is the chat function where you can find out information about becoming a member if you are not currently a web member. There is a link that has been provided there. We would love for you to join and become a part of this dynamic network. We offer 2 membership options, which include individual and institutional. I serve as the membership coordinator and have also provided my contact information in the event there are any questions about joining or either of those 2 categories of membership that we do offer. Without further ado, today's session titled Introverted Women Leaders is being presented by Dr. Bethany King Wilkes. And here's a bit of information about Dr. King Wilkes. Having dedicated over 15 years to STEM education, Dr. Bethany King Wilkes is the Program Director of Seamless Alignment and Integrated Learning Support, SALES, in the Office of Academic Affairs at the Tennessee Board of Regents College System of Tennessee. Before joining TBR, she served in various leadership roles in higher education at the Tennessee State University, Oklahoma State University, and Christian Brothers University. In addition, she has K-12 education experience as a career and technical education program consultant for the Tennessee Department of Education. She is a cohort member of the 2020-2021 Complete Tennessee Leadership Institute State Collaborative on Reform in Education, a Tennessee Achieves, Tennessee Promise Mentor, and the 2019 recipient of the Think, Work, Serve Alumni Award at Tennessee State University College of Engineering. Prior to career transition to the field of education, Bethany worked in industry as an engineer. She earned a Ph.D. in educational psychology and research from the University of Memphis, a Master of Engineering Management from Christian Brothers University, and a BS in Mechanical Engineering from Tennessee State University. Bethany resides in Nolensville, Tennessee, with her husband, Richard, and son, Andrew. And I will go ahead and hand this over to Dr. King Wilkes to start her presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Hollins. Let's see. Are you all seeing the presentation?
No.
Okay. Is it showing now?
Yes, it is showing.
Okay.
Yes.
You gotta zap the children.
And Dr. Hollins, let me also ask you, when it's 15 minutes till, please let me know so I can make sure I'm pacing my presentation correctly.
Will do.
Thank you. So welcome everyone, and I want to thank you for attending this session on Introverted Women Leaders, leveraging the powerful intersection of personality and gender. And let me move this out the way. So some of you may have already attended one of my sessions. I believe this may be the 3rd time that I've had the opportunity to do this workshop for WET, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity. But would like to talk to you a little bit about why I chose to do a presentation on introverted women leaders. So I guess one of the most obvious reasons I do identify with being introverted, and I'm a woman and I'm a leader. And my experience, I guess the first time that I realized that I identify as having an introverted personality was when I was in graduate school at Christian Brothers University, and we took the Myers-Briggs assessment. So I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with that assessment. But anyway, my result was ISFJ. So I, stands for introverted. So like I said, that was the first time that I identified with being introverted. And, I did some research to really understand what that meant. And, after reflecting on my career and just my interaction within a group setting or, within at work, I thought about it and I was like, there were comments, made about me in meetings, where they would say, oh, you sure were quiet in that meeting. You didn't say much, or you sure do take a lot of notes. Something else that I observed, whenever I was asked a question, usually I would ask, well, hey, let me take some time to think about it, because I needed that time to process so that I could give a thoughtful answer. And all of those things are characteristics of introverts. So for this workshop, I have 3 main goals. So the first goal is for us to understand the difference between being an introvert versus an extrovert. And to also, we want to understand qualities that women leaders have, those strengths and also challenges that women leaders face. Then we're going to take that information and we're going to talk about some effective skills that you can use as an introverted leader that you can implement. And then the final goal is to lead in truth, because ultimately you want to be your authentic self. It's my belief, you've got to be authentic in order to be a powerful leader. So the first thing that I would like to do is just a quick poll of the audience. I'm just curious how you identify, whether you identify with being an introvert or an extrovert. So you can use your phone to do this poll, and you've probably done this poll everywhere before. So there's the number at the top of the screen, 37607. And then if you would text Bethany Wilkes 028 to that number. And then once it says that you're in the poll everywhere, then just simply put an A or B based on whether you're an introvert or an extrovert. And I'll wait just maybe a minute or two just to see if we've got any other responses. And while we're waiting, something else I would like to say. So some of you in the audience may not identify with being an introvert, but that's okay, because you still will be able to take something away from this session as well, the things that we'll discuss, because you may be a leader where you have direct reports who are introverts, or you may be mentoring someone who's an introvert. So you can also take the skills that we're going to talk about in this session and help to coach those individuals as well. Okay, so based on those of you who participated in the poll, it looks like the majority of our audience today. Okay, we still have some responses coming in, but still it looks like the majority of the audience does identify with being an introvert. Great, thank you for participating in the poll. All right, so on to our first goal of this workshop, and that's to understand. So what is an introvert? Well, that whole name, or introversion, I guess I should say, actually originated with the psychologist Carl Jung. So he was the first to define introversion, and he defined it as energy being generated from within. So when you think about introverts, they like their quiet time and they like solitude, because that's the time where they re-energize. So it's not that they don't like being around people. Introverts can be very sociable, but still there comes a time where they've got to step away from, the group, the crowd or whatever, and just be in solitude and just recharge. But then on the other hand, extroverts are the opposite. They need to be around people because that's where they get their energy. So their energy source is external to them. So that's pretty much the basic difference between those two personalities. And a little data about introverts and leaders who are introverted. When we specifically look at the United States, some research shows that 1 out of 2 Americans is considered introverted. So that means 50% of our population. And then when you take a look at the US workforce, 4 out of 10 individuals are introverted. But then something that I found really interesting is that when you look at, in the US, senior executives, that level of management, only 1 out of 50 of senior executives in this particular study identified as being introverts. And that study was done in 2009. So yeah, it is a bit dated, but I would suspect that the data probably holds true today. But that's the most recent study that I could find that actually talked about introverts at a senior executive level. So now the next thing that I would like to do is to share just a short video clip with you, because, and this is just a brief conversation, an excerpt from an interview that Oprah did with Amy Schumer. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with that. She's an actress and a comedian. But anyway, let me set up the conversation for you. So both of them, while they're talking, they discover that something that they have in common is being introverted. And during this conversation, I think they do a good job at talking about, they're talking about themselves, but through that, they're doing a good job of explaining the characteristics of introvert, as well as they talk a little bit about extroverts. So while you listen, if you would note some of the characteristics that you hear them say about introverts, as well as some of the characteristics that they mention about extroverts.
Dr. Wilkes.
Yes.
So before we start that, you're the host. We've got folks in the waiting room.
Oh.
I can't admit them.
Oh.
I've handed the host status over to you.
Okay. Thank you for telling me that. So I just hit admit once. I wonder.
Does it admit all?
Say it again, Dr. Hollins.
Do you have a button that says admit all so that those folks can be added?
Let me escape out of this. Okay. So it's just saying admit, and it looks like it was just showing one person at a time.
Okay. Well, wonderful. Unfortunately, we may have to keep a watch on that during the session. Okay.
Okay. So can you tell whether I admitted everybody?
I am not sure. I just got a message to say some folks were in the lobby waiting to be admitted.
Let me stop sharing real quickly to see if I can see. Okay, so I don't see anything.
And we do have some, I do notice some new names on the participant list, so we should be good right now. Okay, thank you.
All right. So now that we have a few more folks, I'll just repeat a little bit again about the video. So we're about to watch a video, and it's an interview. Oprah Winfrey is interviewing Amy Schumer. And what I would like for you to do is listen for characteristics of introverts that they talk about during their conversation, as well as some characteristics that they mention about extroverts.
So, when you like somebody, and I've liked you so much from afar,
Thanks.
You always want to be like them. There's a part of you that says, oh, gee, I want to. And so when I was reading Girl with the lower back tattoo,
yeah.
I was so thrilled to realize, how you and I are most alike?
Let me guess. You're an introvert.
I'm an introvert.
I knew it.
You knew it?
Yes, because I would guess that about you. Because
really?
You're
the only person I've ever said that to that they don't say, oh, you're not.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
No, but the way you described it in the book, that is so me.
Yeah.
I've been at parties where I have to get up and leave.
Take a break.
I'm just in the bathroom.
Recharge. Yeah.
Recharge.
I love the bathroom.
Love it.
Love to hide in the bathroom.
Love to hide in the bathroom.
Yeah. People are confused about, but how could you get up in front of so many people and everything? Say that it's different. And when you're so giving of yourself and your mind and everything, you need to take a break. You can't.
Because you're giving.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting because Gail,
yeah,
who I know you just interviewed with,
I love her,
is the best friend ever. But she is a true extrovert.
Yeah, is she?
True extrovert
Okay.
in that she gets energy from people. She
Feeds off it.
She feeds
and
off
we
it.
get sucked dry.
And I get sucked dry.
Yeah, you need to be taken out of a party in a stretcher.
Yes.
I know.
We will leave the same party and she'll say, oh my God, that was so much fun. And I'm like, oh,
like, I need to be quiet. Can we just put music on and be quiet?
Yes,
yeah.
yes, yes.
I need like long silences.
All right. Let's see. Let me go back.
So, you know, when you like somebody, and I've liked.
Okay. So if you would use the chat or feel free to unmute, what were some of the characteristics that you heard Oprah and Amy talk about for introverts, being introverted? And Dr. Hollins, I can't see the chat. So if anybody puts anything in chat, just let me know.
Or that they need time to recharge, which is so true.
You said it's so true?
Of me, yes.
Yes, I can identify with that as well. Any other comments that you heard from that conversation? Or even share, what did you hear them say about extroverts? Because Gail gave an example of her best friend, Gail King.
They have a tendency to get energy from people, and they have a need to be around people. That's one of the things that I did hear Oprah mention about Gail.
Yes, I thought that was funny how she mentioned when she and Gail go to a party together, Gail leaves the party thinking, oh, that was so great. And, you know, she's energized, where it sounds like Oprah was like, oh, you know, just exhausted. So that was just classic of introvert versus extrovert. So the next slide, I'll just include
Dr. King Wilkes, we may need to check the waiting room again.
Okay. And you know what? See, it's not showing me. I don't know what I did last time where I brought it up, where it showed me I needed to admit somebody.
It may be clicking the participant list.
Okay.
It may show you there.
Let's see. Okay, I see someone there. Okay, thank you. Now I know. I think I can leave that box up. So if we have anybody else. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So this slide just shows us some of the common characteristics, and we've already discussed many of them. So I won't read all of them, but there were a few more I think that I wanted to point out to you. Prefer writing. Introverts prefer to write versus where an extrovert prefers to talk. So that goes back to the whole thing when we talked about introverts need that time to think and to reflect, especially before, you know, they answer a question. So when you think about when you have to write something, it requires thought, and you have an opportunity, you know, to reflect as you're writing. So whereas with an extrovert, when it says they prefer talking, lots of times, let's say if there's a problem that an extroverted personality is solving, they like to talk that problem out loud. You know, they talk through it. Whereas, you know, we've already said the introvert likes to reflect a while before they actually talk and give their thoughts or a solution. Also, right under that, introverts prefer small group settings, and they really love like one-on-one focused conversations. Whereas the extrovert, you know, we've already talked about, they're energized by, you know, being around a lot of people. So therefore, they prefer larger groups where they can move around, change topics. You know, the conversation is fast paced. Also, something else I'd like to point out, introverts need time to prepare. So again, that goes back to when we talked about they need time to reflect. Whereas an extrovert, they enjoy just winging it, or as they say, flying by the seat of their pants. And when I look at those two characteristics in particular, it makes me think back years ago when I had a supervisor, and whenever we had to do presentations together, I would be a little bit anxious, have a little bit of anxiety, because she was definitely extroverted and she did like to wing it. And she would say, fly by the seat of her pants. Whereas I was like, okay, I don't know what to expect. I don't know what's going to come out of her mouth. But by and by, you know, we learned to work together. She understood that I at least wanted to start off with some talking points so that I would know what to expect. So there's hope for introverts and extroverts to definitely work together in harmony. You just have to get that understanding for one another's differences. One misconception that I would like to clear up is what an introvert is not. So many times people think that being introverted automatically means that a person is shy. And that's not necessarily the case, because you could actually have a shy extrovert. And the reason why introvert and shy is not the same thing is because introvert has more to do with, as we already mentioned, personality, you know, how you're wired, where you get your energy from, your source of energy. Whereas if you're shy, that's more of something that's debilitating, especially when interacting socially with people, somewhat of like a fear of negative judgment. So totally different things. And an example that I like to use that I discovered when I was preparing for this presentation is Barbra Streisand. You know, many of us are familiar with Barbra Streisand. She's an amazing entertainer, but she's shy, and yet she's an extrovert, because we know Barbra Streisand has this large personality, you know, when she's on stage. But I did not know for years that she dealt with stage fright. You know, of course, has coping skills where she's learned to deal with it. But that is an example of being shy, you know, something debilitating, that stage fright. But yet at the same time, she's an extrovert. So at this time, I just want to really briefly maybe hear some of the challenges that you foresee that introverted leaders may have, because we've already talked about, you know, characteristics. So just wanted to maybe hear from your experiences. What challenges do you think an introverted leader would have? And you can use chat or you can unmute.
I know a big problem that I have is twofold. Like, one, people always assume that because I'm not shy, that I am extroverted.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a sharer and I don't mind to share, but I'm very much introverted. And then two, also, like sometimes I need to make a decision and I get really stressed out by that because I do need that time to recharge, or sometimes people coming at me and I just need like my quiet space to kind of do my thing, like what I call marinating on whatever.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Lauren. Those are very good examples. And just some more examples about common challenges that introverted leaders face. Definitely the people exhaustion, because, you know, we've already talked about that. Fast pace. So when they're, you know, in an environment where there's a group discussion, or, you know, you could be at a professional conference, just the fast pace of the schedule can be a challenge for introverts. Because like Lauren said, they need that time to just go be alone and kind of recharge. Getting interrupted is a good one too. So the example with that would be being in a meeting. And because we said, you know, introverts, they reflect, they want to think things out before they speak. So they may be talking in a meeting and they pause because they're reflecting. But an extrovert looks at that pause as, oh, well, they're through, so let me say what I have to say. So that's an example of that can be a challenge, getting interrupted. Another challenge, the pressure to self-promote. So a lot of introverts find it awkward or difficult to talk about themselves. So that's a challenge. And we know that in certain situations, especially being a leader, you are going to have to self-promote and you know, and talk about your accomplishments. Also, negative impressions. So what that means is negative impressions that others may have of that introvert. And an example could be if an introvert is quiet in a meeting, you know, what they're really doing, they're observing, they're listening, they're taking it all in and they're processing what they're hearing. But someone else may take it as though, oh, they're not engaged in the meeting, they don't want to be here, or they're standoffish. So that's what that means, that negative impressions can also be a challenge. Any strengths that you can think of for introverts, just based on what we've talked about so far?
Because we're quiet in meetings and in other group settings, we tend to hear solutions to problems, or we can come up with solutions to problems quicker than other people because we've listened to everything, versus attempting to talk over everyone and not hearing what could be an actual, what could be the actual solution.
Yes, I believe that was Chastity talking. Thank you. That's a very good example that you just gave. So some characteristics of powerful introverted leaders: taking time to think through where to lead an organization next. That touches on what Chastity just talked about, solving problems. Also, powerful introverted leaders, they make sure that they understand a situation before making decisions. Like I mentioned in the meeting, they're quiet, they're observing, they're listening to what's being said and just really processing what they're hearing. And also, powerful introverted leaders ask questions. And the good thing to that is, not only are they asking questions, but they really, truly are listening to the answers that are being given, because they're, like I said, they're taking it all in and they're processing the information. Some other things too that are strengths are typically introverts are calm, and they have that grounded energy in times of change. So in other words, introverted leaders are really good, I guess you could say would be good as a transformational leader, leading an organization through a time of change. Also, this next bullet talks about how they empower others to be leaders in their own right. And in a way, we can go back to when I mentioned introverted leaders, I guess, are maybe uncomfortable with self-promotion because they're more, I guess, focused on the team, being team-oriented, and they really are in tune to the folks that are on their team. So that's where that comes in. If they're in tune and they really listen and make an effort to understand the team that they're leading, they're going to be able to identify the strengths of their team members, and then from there, empower the folks that they lead to become leaders in their own right. So this next slide is a quote that I really like, and it resonated with me. And it's a quote from Susan Cain. She's an author of a book that talks about introverts, but I'm going to read this quote to you. Often introverts become leaders because of their passion, not necessarily because they were seeking the leadership opportunity. And so I also have an image of Rosa Parks on this picture, on the slide, because to me, she just represented what this quote is saying. And we all know, the history and the role that Rosa Parks had in our history. So she was the mother of the civil rights movement. So that particular day, when she made that decision that she was not going to sit at the back of the bus, but in the front of the bus, that day, she became a leader of the civil rights movement and really made an impact. And it's not, just like the quote says, it's not that she was seeking to do that. She was just simply passionate about her civil rights. So at this time, I just want to give you an opportunity. Is there anyone who has an experience that they'd like to share where you weren't seeking a leadership opportunity, but because of your passion about something, you just naturally became a leader? And feel free to use chat, or if you want to unmute. All right, we'll move on with the presentation. So now let's focus on women leaders. What are some challenges that you all have had in your leadership roles?
So I have an example. This is Christy.
Okay.
I have an example to where this morning, just for example, I had 16 different emails because we're having changes where I currently work, and I was calm because I'm the introvert in the group, and everyone else, it was just like a flurry of emails. So I think being a woman in leadership and as an introvert, it can help you and benefit you in staying calm and making decisions, definitely.
Yes. Thank you, Christy, for sharing. So just a few things on this slide, some more challenges for women leaders. Men and women, or I should say research shows that men and women lead differently. And this is not saying in all situations, but leadership literature says that usually men are more transactional leaders, whereas women are more usually transformational. And I know we've got a lot of leadership scholars out there who have degrees in leadership, so you're probably familiar with these different leadership styles. But typically transactional just means rewarding or exchanging rewards for certain performance. And usually with transactional leadership, there's very little change. Usually that leader is just kind of maintaining status quo for the organization, just kind of keeping things running. Whereas the transformational leader, it's all about change and taking an organization to the next level. So with that in mind, it's saying that typically women are those agents of change, you know, women leaders. So I really like that when I read that in the literature. But also just some other challenges for women leaders, less likely to be promoted, you know, that still happens. Also, women leaders have to face attitudinal and systemic barriers to their progress. So, you know, it's one thing when you're working on your own professional development and you're trying to acquire skills to make you better so that you can progress in your career. So that's one thing, because that's in your control. But then when you have things that are out of your control and it's more of barriers that are going on in the organization or the system that you're working in, that's another thing. So that's a challenge that you can't control and definitely something that needs to be changed. Some other challenges as well. Women leaders can be mistaken as being indecisive or less assertive. So again, that's just more so of someone else's external observation. Because lots of times leadership characteristics can be male dominated. But as women leaders, you know, there are more of us and we're going to make changes moving forward. This is another interesting data point that I wanted to share. And this is coming from 2018, but it stated that 1 out of 20 CEOs of S&P companies were women. So that's only 5%. And the reason why I want to share that statistic is just because that's such a small percentage. And that's something that overlaps or that we saw in common with introverted leaders, that it was such a small percentage that we saw introverts being at an executive level. Some more data that I also wanted to share. This specifically deals with women leaders in higher education, since that's what our organization is all about. Since 2006, women earned over half bachelor's degrees, more specifically 57%, and then definitely more than 50% of doctoral degrees. So with that in mind, it's interesting when you look at the pie chart on the right, and this data was taken from 2016, when you look at how many men versus women actually held the position of being a president in higher education. So just looking at the chart, and it's broken down by gender, but then it's also broken down by ethnicity. But it looks like about 70% of the presidential roles were held by men, where only 30% were held by women. So now going back to just talking about strengths and challenges, what are some, and you can talk about both of them, what are some strengths that you foresee that women have, women leaders? And so feel free to use chat or you can unmute. So I've got a slide that shares some strengths. So often women leaders empower others. And if you remember, that's a common characteristic that we also said about introverted leaders. Also, women leaders usually focus on building relationships. You will find that women leaders also believe in collaboration. It's all about the teamwork. And we've already talked about how women leaders are usually more transformational in their leadership style. So this next slide pretty much to me is a graphic illustration that summarizes what this workshop, the topic of this workshop is about. And that's the intersection of personality and gender. So in the previous slides, we've already discussed the strengths of being a woman and a leader, and also the strengths of being an introvert and a leader. So now what we want to do moving forward, we want to focus on those, that overlap in the center of this graphic and focus on those common strengths to leverage your leadership. So now we're to the point in the discussion, the goal about implementation. So how you can implement effective leadership skills. So one of the books, a reference that I really like is The Introverted Leader, Building on Your Quiet Strength. And it's by Dr. Jennifer Kahnweiler. And in this book, so she did a study where she specifically looked at introverted leaders. And while working with them, she was able to see certain themes, or in other words, skills that they had that were really effective in their leadership. And so she summarized, I guess you could say the skills or the themes that she saw among these leaders into 6 categories. And I've got them on the screen: leading people in projects, delivering powerful presentations, communicating and coaching for results, etc. But for the sake of time for this presentation, I'm only going to talk about that very first skill, which is leading people in projects. But after this workshop, you will get a copy of my slides, as well as I'm including some other supplemental information that I think that you will find really useful. And one of those things will be like a quiz or a survey that Dr. Kahnweiler came up with on how you can assess these 6 leadership skills. And you'll be able to tell where you're really strong and where you have some room for improvement. So I really encourage you to take a look at that questionnaire. So let's talk a little bit more about leading people in projects. So through Dr. Kahnweiler's study that I mentioned, she came up with what she called the 4P process. And these are 4 steps that she recommends that introverted leaders can do to improve their skills. And so, like I said, we're going to focus on leading people in projects. So the 4 steps, the first step starts with prepare, that's on the right. Second, presence, push, and practice. So let's go into detail about what each one of those means. So with prepare, we've already talked about that it's just natural for introverts to take that time to be prepared. They don't want to be caught off guard. They want to be able to reflect and think about what a problem may be and a solution before they actually communicate it. So part of that what Dr. Kahnweiler says that you can do in order to make sure that you are prepared is to know yourself. So that's, knowing your strengths and weaknesses. So that's why I said the questionnaire that I mentioned to you will be very helpful as you learn about yourself. Also, building a team, your own team, that's a part of the preparation. Because earlier I mentioned, because introverts are so observant and they value that one-on-one focused time, they really get to know and understand the people that they lead. So therefore, introverted leaders are in a good place where they can select and place people on projects based on their strengths. And also, another way the introverted leaders can be prepared is creating the environment. So creating that environment for success, for your team to be successful. So that second step in the process is presence. So she's recommending that introverts stay in the moment. And the way she recommended that you can do that is to walk around. And I know that, we're in a pandemic, time of a pandemic, so a lot of our work is done virtually. But when you are in an office setting, it's important as an introverted leader to make sure you walk around from time to time, because that's when you'll have those spontaneous conversations with your team, with coworkers. And she even said that, it doesn't hurt to jot down things from conversations that you have so that you can remember them and follow up with individuals, especially teams that you lead. It's important to let your team know that they are heard and you value what they contribute to the team. The third step is push. Introverted leaders must push themselves out of their comfort zones. So earlier when we talked about typical characteristics of introverted personalities, you heard me say introverts prefer this, or introverts prefer one-on-one conversations. Well, even though you have a preference, you've got to remember that there are times when you've got to push yourself beyond that. So Dr. Kahnweiler, she recommends you've got to remain open-minded. Also, learn to delegate. Oftentimes, introverts will take on a lot of action items for themselves because they have a tendency to work better in solitude rather than a team. But as a leader, you can't do that. You can't afford to do that. So you've got to learn to delegate. And then finally, that fourth step is just practicing consistently. So whatever those new skills that you're trying to strengthen, you will do that by implementing them and practicing them. So this next slide that I want to share, it just builds on the 4 Ps process that we just talked about. And it's just a template for an action plan. And pretty much whatever your challenge is, whatever that skill is you're trying to improve, this is a template that you can use to lay out what action steps you're going to do based on that prepare, presence, push, and practice. And then you'll see in that second column, you need to put what the benefit will be of each action that you do. Because when you think about motivational theory, you usually need to know the outcome or what the benefit is. And once you have an understanding of that, that's where you'll find the source of your motivation. And then in the final column, after you've implemented the step, then you need to note what the result was. Because again, when you see that positive result, that is just going to give you more motivation and encouragement to continue with your plan and building on your skills.
Dr. King Wilkes, we're at 12:15.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Hollins. So I won't get into too much detail of this slide, but I did want to fill it in just to give you an example for this particular challenge. And let me read it. It says, I feel pressure to self-promote, especially starting conversations. I have an upcoming professional meeting where I need to do this. So this is just an example. If you had that particular challenge, you know, a skill that you want to strengthen, I provided, I filled in the template so you could see an example of an action plan. And you'll get a copy of these slides for your records. So that concludes the workshop, and we've come full circle. Hopefully you feel that we achieved the goals, which were to understand, you know, the differences between an introvert and an extrovert. Also, we discussed ideas or skills that you can use to implement to strengthen your leadership. And then finally, lead in truth. To me, that's the ultimate goal. Be your authentic self, and you will be a powerful leader. At this time, if there are any questions or discussion, I'm open to that. But I would like to, usually whenever I do these workshops in person, I like to give books that are related to the topic that, you know, I find to be very good resources. And so I would like to give my first book to the first person that joined the workshop today. And I think Dr. Hollins has the attendance list of participants.
Sure, and that is Miss Martha Mashika. I may be pronouncing your last name wrong, and if I am, please correct me.
Micheka, you were pretty close. Thank you.
Hi. So Martha, if you would put your email address in the chat, because I'd like to email you and get your address. Because I would like to send you, the book is called Quietly Visible, Leading with Influence and Impact as an Introverted Woman Leader. And it's by Carol Stewart. And so, oh, thank you. I see where you dropped your email address. So I'll be reaching out to you today so that I can send you your book. And then I have a second book that I'd like to give away. Is there anyone on the call that recently joined WIT?
Looks like Lauren, Selena.
Lauren.
I'm new.
So Lauren, I already have your email address. So I'll email you today and get your mailing address. And the book that I want to send to you is called The Introverted Leader, Building on Your Quiet Strength by Dr. Jennifer Kahnweiler.
Thank you so much.
Dr. King Wilkes, would you like me to share the introvert-extrovert spectrum link?
Oh, yes, yes. So Dr. Hollins is going to drop a link to another questionnaire for you to take a look at. And pretty much it gives you about 20 statements where you answer true or false, and it'll just give you an idea of whether you lean more toward being an introvert or extrovert. Thank you, Dr. Hollins, for reminding me of that.
Well, so yes, the link has been provided in the chat, and if I can, I'm probably one of a few of us here on the call that have participated in this presentation over the last few years. As when Dr. King Wilkes opened up, she shared that she had presented this at a face-to-face conference. We did some Wet Wednesdays last year. She came back and presented to the as a Wet Wednesday. And what I've learned over this last year, especially being at home with children and trying to assist them with their education in first grade and fourth grade, is it takes about 3 times for things to sink in. And I can tell you, as I look over my career over the last 3 years, there's been a lot of transition and a lot of changes. And understanding that I weave in and out of introvert and extrovert, all depending on the situation, who I'm at the table with, whether it's a leadership opportunity in the workplace versus a leadership opportunity that I may be coordinating or at the table with in the community. And so this is always great to hear. I always gain some great tools to add to my toolbox, and I hope that everyone else did as well. Thank you.
I was looking at the chat. It looks like Dr. Allen said, it's interesting. The link states that I am an introvert and I could have sworn I was extroverted. Well, Dr. Allen, it sounds like you're a bit like Dr. Hollins. You can go back and forth just depending on the situation.
It looks as though there may be a question from Lauren. She has her hand raised.
Yeah. Dr. Wilkes, how do you, so this is something that I really struggle with, is like the self-promotion aspect. I don't necessarily, if somebody asks me about my project, I can easily talk about my project because I'm very passionate about it and I love talking about my project. But if somebody asks me, like, tell me something that you've done that you're proud of, or something that, like, so self-promotion about myself is like my greatest struggle in my mind. Like, trying to come up with anything that I've done good is just crickets. How do you handle that? Is that just like my own personal malfunction in life?
No, I definitely would not call it a malfunction, because I too, being introverted, it is difficult for me to talk about myself. But over time, I've realized in my professional life, there are times where I do have to promote myself, whether it is I have to do, a performance write-up to justify something. So it just goes back to preparing. Maybe you just need to have something that you have written down and thought about so that the next time when you're in a situation you have to self-promote, you already have like that speech, prepared. And maybe that will ease some of the anxiety or just the difficulty of self-promoting, because you've got to do it, Lauren. And it's not, and I don't know if you feel like this, but the reason why it felt awkward for me, because I feel like, ooh, is that bragging? That's why, but it's not bragging.
Yeah, it feels icky.
Yeah, you've accomplished a lot and you should let the world know.
But it also feels like I've accomplished nothing though at the same time, but maybe I'm just not giving myself credit, but like that, like that's the whole internal struggle.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I say, hey, if you want to talk about it one-on-one, let's do that. Because I will be one of your biggest cheerleaders and encourage.
I'm gonna take you up on that.
Please
right.
do.
Because I never find you. So.
Well, we're at 12:24, and I would just like to say on behalf of WET and our efforts to continuously improve WET Wednesday sessions, I'm going to ask that you all take a few minutes to complete the feedback survey, which has been provided in the chat function. It's gone out to everyone. If you want to copy and paste that link into your internet address bar so that you have it saved, that would be ideal. And we appreciate you and hope that you have a great rest of your day. If there's not anything else to add, again, we do want to give a huge, huge, huge round of applause to Dr. King Wilkes for sharing her knowledge, insight, and helping us introverts feel a little bit better about how we're navigating these various spaces.
Thank you. I enjoyed it. I hope I get invited back, and I'll have to do another topic next time.
We are sure you will be invited back.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anything else to add before we close out today's session? If
Um,
not,
Immediately following this, those board members that are on here, I need to stay on. We're gonna be off of here by 1 o'clock at the latest, so I need to talk to the board members just a minute on strategic plan. All right, looks like we're down to board members now. Okay, so we're 12:26. We're 4 minutes ahead. This is great. This is great. Okay, so we ended. Do you have your strategic plans in front of you? I hope.
Patricia, how are you doing?
I'm good. How you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm going to ask Bethany to either make me a host or if we can stop
Okay.
the recording.
Oh, that's right. Let me make you,
Oh, yeah, that's right.
that's right. Make host. Okay, Dr. Hollins, it should be back to you now.